Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. My name is llBonkll, and today it is time. I asked what you guys wanted to see, and you answered. That answer is the Worst Warframe Tournament. Now, if you don't quite understand the concept, it's okay. As this will be round one, I'm gonna explain everything that you need to know. For those of you that participated or watched the best Warframe tournament series that I did a few months back, this will basically be the same idea, but flip-flopped, with the worst frame being the one that we are trying to find. Those of you that are new, here are the basics. I have created a tournament bracket that includes 50 of the 51 Warframes. Wisp is not involved as the winner of the best frame tourney. Each frame is matched against one other, with the outlier of 2 Warframes granted a free pass to the second round because of the bracket's design. I have been releasing polls throughout the last week or so asking you, the community, to tell me who the worst frame in each matchup was overall. And the round 1 votes are in. Keep in mind while watching this that it's your fault if your favorite frame is called bad, not mine. This tournament was chosen by you. This tournament will also obviously be heavily biased by many players in the community. It's just gonna happen, nothing I can do. But I also think that's what's gonna make it fun. We aren't here to find the exact worst stats, worst frame according to the numbers, probably. We're looking for who you guys think sucks cheeks. Although, I guess you guys could actually pick the actual factual worst frame too. We'll have to see. I will be going through each and every matchup, showing the results of the poll, and very briefly explaining why this outcome may have occurred. This explanation will also be accompanied by comments from you guys on each poll. Mostly, there'll be one from either side of the debate, but some polls were like so one-sided that there's no way you could argue one is, worse. So, all of that is basically in an effort to make sure that you understand why the poll ended the way it did directly from the viewers and the voters' mouth. And the most important thing, everyone watching this video and everyone looking at these polls can start to understand the other point of view and maybe even learn something about a frame that you might have overlooked that will make you rethink your answer. The last thing I'd like to mention when it comes to the concept of this tournament video is that the voting for the second round will begin very soon after this video's release. So make sure you're looking out for those polls so that you can get your opinion in there next time. Anyway, this explanation must come to an end now. I know it was long. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer the comments, but I'm sure it will become very clear what we're all doing here as we get into this.
Round 1, fight!
To start us off in the top left of our bracket, our very first matchup in the search for the worst is Atlas versus Ashe. Now, obviously round 1 is going to come with blowout matchups. It's just gonna happen. And right here is gonna be our first example of that. Ashe, according to you guys, is just straight up better. Atlas was destroyed, and by that I mean he won. Yup, this is a trash tourney after all. The worst one is the one that will be moving on to round 2. Even with a pretty easy answer here for most Tenno, let's look at a few of your comments. At least one for either side of this debate. Our first comment comes from Ortis the Muted. He had one main point: Ashe is easier to build. And although this is not why I would say Ashe is better, I guess it's true. He did admit that Atlas can hold his ground though, just with more investment. What about a pro Atlas comment? Well, there's actually only one. Vitex here says Atlas is more than capable of the kind of content that Ashe can do, and on top of that, Atlas provides a couple of extra bonuses like extra loot, CC, and survivability. Now, I'm glad I'm not voting here because I can be fully honest with you guys, I don't play Atlas nearly enough. So, I will just have to believe Vitex when he says that. Sadly for him, it seems the mass of the community disagrees. Anyway, once again, Atlas will be moving up to round 2 as the worst frame here, and let's go on ahead to our next matchup.
Round 1, fight!
Baruch versus Banshee. The monk with a passy fist versus the Sound Queen, but not the Octavia kind. And sadly, once again, it looks like a blowout, with Banshee easily being labeled the worst frame of the two. Now, I will say that I'm 100% in agreement. Baruch is crazy strong, and there's just no way anyone could explain to me that Banshee is better in a way I would actually believe. The funny thing is, most of you agreed with me, and the few that didn't, there's no comments from. So, let's just look at a few in agreement of the result. Poo Poo Pee Pee here, okay, that's his name, states that he likes Banshee, but feels that she's too much of a glass cannon and she needs some kind of survivability change. And looking at Baruch in this circumstance, like against her in this matchup, it's a very good reason to call her worse. Baruch has nutty survivability. The second comment here is from Genesis Umbra. A quick and simple statement, but true nonetheless. Baruch is better for higher level missions. Yep, I mean, I totally agree. I'm glad we're all on the same page. So there you go. Banshee, see you in round 2. You'll be moving up a little closer to the title of worst. But there's still many more matchups to go, and I have a feeling Banshee won't be the one left standing.
Round 1. Fight!
A dragon and a sentient, Caliban versus Chroma, are gonna have a scuffle next. And what do you know, basically another blowout. Although I will say I think both of these frames are at least average, Chroma is better in my opinion. Not by this much though. You guys made your choice. It looks like Caliban is not a very appealing frame. Why though? Let's look at some comments. The first explanation of vote I will show is from iFuse, for the side of Caliban being the worst frame, our real outcome. He believes Chroma is just more viable if built correctly, being capable of Archon hunts and Eidolons, and even just being a great farming frame. And Caliban here, in his words, is a random ability ball of nothing. Now, I'd like to agree with most of that. I will say that Caliban definitely has at least one great ability with his big ol' beam. So overall, I'd say Chroma's better too, but I would say don't discredit Caliban completely. We'll have to see if he continues past round 2 as the worst frame. I hope DE messes with Caliban a little bit soon because I think his kit has a lot of potential with just a few small changes. There are people who believe Chroma is the worst frame though. Let's look at one of those comments. This one comes from Bart DeZwart. Bart believes that Chroma is very underwhelming, boasting a lackluster 1 and a 4 that's basically just good for credits. He does admit to Chroma's armor and ward being somewhat useful. Next, he says that because of the way in which Vex armor is gained, it can be easily outperformed with something like Eclipse. Now, I didn't really say this before, but we're not comparing Helminthed frames here. We're comparing the frames. Not a frame who gets to use somebody else's ability, and that's the only reason they're better. So, from this point on, I know I didn't state it before, and I'm not going to be mad if you guys make points toward Helminth since I didn't point it out, but from this point forward, guys, try not to take Helminth into account when voting. I know it's an integral part of the game, but I want to find out truly the worst without a player-to-player patch 1.1 on these frames. He also speaks at the end a small bit on Caliban, talking about the small amount of capability through armor strip and CC that Caliban is capable of, which he believes gives him an effective enough kit over Chroma. So there you go. Comments are shown. Doesn't really matter. Caliban going to round 2 because the people made their choice.
Round 1. Fight!
Fiery Phoenix Ember takes up the next match with Equinox. This one is starting to show a little disagreement finally from the community, with the poll being still not insanely close, but definitely not a blowout by any means. Ember and Equinox are both very capable frames, and the one moving to round 2 out of these E's is gonna be Ember. The Tenno out there have once again made their decision that Equinox is the better frame and Ember is the worse. And I'm in complete agreement once again. Although having a slightly more difficult learning curve, Equinox is just a powerhouse when played correctly, and believe it or not, the complicated looking kit that Equinox has actually isn't that tough to learn once you figure out what you're doing, since the build is basically just going to be the nuke build like everyone else uses when you're playing her, and all that is like 2 buttons. Anyway, what did you have to say about this matchup? Why do you all believe Equinox is better and Ember is worse? Well, let's take a look. I'm just gonna show one. This comment I think explains the main idea behind most people's decisions and basically what I'm thinking when I see these frames on my team. This comment comes from Mr. Fagan. He says simply, a bad Equinox is worse than a good Ember, but a good Ember is worse than a good Equinox. I know that might sound pretty obvious, but in my personal opinion, this guy hit the nail on the head in this argument. Who's next, baby?
Round 1. Fight!
2 OG frames. Some of the frames the community has had the most time to perfect and experiment with over the years. The Sword of the Stars, Excalibur, enters the ring with the Snowman Sadist, Frost. So who's worse, the swinging sword or the freezing wind? Well, according to you, to my surprise, if I'm being 100% honest, is Frost. Now, I'm not a Frost main or anything, how I think he's boring to play, but I have been experimenting a lot myself with both of these frames lately, with the radial augment dash build for Excalibur and the massive armor strip Frost build, the things everyone's running these days. And in the endgame of Warframe, I think Frost is straight up more capable, especially survivability and defense wise. Excal is fun, don't get me wrong, but I just don't see it. I'm gonna have to look at a couple of your guys' comments to help convince me of this tragedy. First, let's do a comment that agrees with me. Actually funny because it mentions both of the builds I like using. I know everyone's using them, so it's not like this is a crazy coincidence. This comment comes from Arid, stating that the new Excal buff helped his radial build a lot, but Frost's armor strip is just better, and he likes how Frost is still useful against Eximus enemies, who, as we all know, are a huge nuisance. But why is Frost worse, you may ask? Why did people vote this way? Well, if I'm being honest, it seems like a lack of experience is shown here, as most of the pro Excalibur comments aren't exactly precise in why he's actually better. I mean, I'll show a few. Again, this is personal opinion on the tournament, but I'm sorry, you guys are just wrong here. I have to go with your choice, but that is my opinion. You guys were wrong, putting Excalibur as the better frame and moving Frost into round 2. Anyway, Frost will somehow be moving ahead, and we must be moving on in our quest to find the garbage can frame. Time for our closest match yet.
Round 1. Fight!
The blood-reaving Garuda facing off with the Energy Master and Glass Nuke Gara. And who took the W, which also means they're worse? Yep, I'm confusing myself at this point. Well, it's Gara. She is the worst frame in the eyes of the people. Not by much, but the Glass Warrior will still be moving on. As it is a pretty close matchup, of course, we have to investigate some reasons from the mouths of the commenters. The first comment that goes toward our true outcome, with Gara being worse, although a simple one, is good. Neural Sensei made his choice because as of recent he's been playing Garuda much more. Additionally, he's tired of the juggle mechanics involved within the gameplay of Gara. I can see that Gara sometimes does require a little more attentiveness when you're actually playing the game, but on the other hand, there's a little part of me that says, why is a slightly more focused kit a reason to think they're worse? Then again, it's up to you guys, and if your reason is this reason, I'm okay with it. Everyone can have their own. But on the other hand, why don't we take a peek at the comments that go toward the Gara lovers? Why was Garuda worse in their eyes? Well, Domze Arts has a few good points that may convince some of these voters differently. A very good damage 1, 90% damage reduction and infinite scaling on his 2, an energy generator 3, and a map-wide defense barrier. Good points once again. Although, I'd like to point out that with the new operator energy thing, Gara's 3 might start to fade away in the meta as more power-focused builds come to the forefront. Just a prediction, I'm sure Garas are still using energy all over the place right now. As, in my mind, this energy field just may not be needed as much, especially since it requires an augment for that energy part. Anyway, my opinion on this one would have probably also been Gara as worse, because I do love playing Garuda, I just find her fun. And luckily you guys agreed, with Gara moving on to round 2.
Round 1. Fight!
Two best friends must throw punches next with our Speed Demon Goss and the newly buffed Ball of Bile Grendel. And before I continue, I will say that I am not versed in any way of how good the new Grendel is. I've barely touched him since the changes, all I've heard is good things though. Which is why I am surprised at how horribly beaten Goss was in this poll. The community overwhelmingly chose Grendel as the worst frame. And don't get me wrong, Goss is insane and I love him, but I'm pretty sure Grendel nowadays is almost at his level strength and capability wise. I'm thinking this poll was mass voted by a lot of people who also, like me, hadn't really tried the new Grendel or given him a fair shot, so we'll have to see what happens to him in round 2. I'm kinda hoping he doesn't make it any further. But to truly understand what's going on here, we must head to the comments. Starting with once again a comment that supports the actual outcome of the poll. Why did you guys think Grendel was worse? This comment comes from Maverick Denduri, the man who wrote an entire book as a comment during the best tournament, and he's warned me it's coming again in the later rounds. This time, luckily, I didn't have to scroll down and read the whole thing. It's actually a very concise explanation for his vote. He believes that Goss is simply just better because of a few factors. 1, Goss is 90 damage reduction, Grendel is slower, takes more damage, and does less damage. Now, I'm gonna have to believe you, Denduri, as again, I am no Grendel aficionado and wouldn't know if you're lying to me just yet. But where are my Grendel lovers at? Well, there's a few. The biggest one I'd like to show comes from Build 10, a man who is definitely mentally insane, as it turns out that he's been been a Grendel main since before the buffs, just because his friend told him, and I quote, "There's a fat Warframe." I love it. Anyway, he explains that Grendel is a jack of all trades, able to be a tank, strip armor, meatball around for movement, has some toxin damage, and an uber strong nourish buff. I'd like to think that Grendel will one day be known just as the fat Warframe, and that's it. It brings a tear to my eye. It's just so beautiful. Anyway, let's move on so Grendel can go and see if he can fit in that box. Free round 2 box time. Yep, we've arrived at the first free pass Warframe that will be moving up to round 2 without a bout. Not really gonna explain why they ended up here, it just happened. You don't have to believe they're bad in any way, and you can rectify this mistake if you believe it's a mistake in the next round when they face off with their new opponent. Our first free pass frame will be Steinax. I love Steinax. I think he's really fun. He's here. Not gonna explain as I said. And you know, we might as well just go ahead and throw in that second free pass frame, and who it is, of course, it's incredibly terrible Aros. Look out for them being a voted match in the next round. Let's move to our next real matchup of round 1.
Round 1. Fight!
Two greats once again are heading in, but as we have all learned to this point, only one can be the worst frame. Even if they are both great, there is always one that is worse. And in this match of Haro versus Hildryn, the choice was made. That is, the fact that Shield Mom is tonight's big winner, winning the title of the worst frame, a great prize. Personally, I used to main Haro for a while, and I'll say that he's extremely strong, a great support, and just all around a pretty fun frame to play. But guys, please tell me the comments will show a little bit of hesitation, because Hildryn is not 70% difference in votes worse. In my opinion at least, this poll should have been our closest yet. Who's gonna explain to me their decision? Well, let's go look. Once again, we're going to look at a comment from Erit, as his explanations are usually some of the better ones. Not a diss to anybody else, just in the first round when I'm only picking a few, I like to pick stuff like this. He gets his point across pretty good. This time, he's for Hildryn being worse. Why? Because of a few factors. The first is that Haro can beat out Hildryn in energy gain. He's one of the best frames for keeping your team alive, and he can even do his own shield gating. Hildryn who? Well, Hildryn had some supporters too. Let's see if they can make a strong enough point to change a few minds. Well, a comment from Neural Sensei is actually one of the few Hildryn supporters out there, and I won't say his reasoning is as sound as maybe Erit, but again, this is a personal vote. The reason is yours to say if it's important to the argument, not mine. Sensei makes the point that Hildryn is strong enough to outperform Haro in public missions, and that most people voting Hildryn worse must be solo players. Now, I will say that this is a very clearly subjective opinion, and that's what we're here for. Opinions will start comment arguments. See ya in round 2, Hildryn. Who's up next? Well, let me quick interject here. If you're enjoying the video, or even just want to make sure you see the next round of polls or see any of my future content, gonna ask that maybe you head on down and hit that like button. Possibly, maybe even click that bigger one that says sub. I mean, you're already there. It's pretty close. Come on. Anyway, I also want to quick mention that throughout this series of videos, I'll include more comments from each poll. There is just a lot of matchups in this first round, and that's why I'm only picking 1 or 2 to show. You will all have your chance. Blah, blah, blah. That's all you need to hear. Let's get back to the video already. Okay, fine. A pretty easy to predict fight will be our next.
Round 1. Fight!
Invis Avara, the boneless jellyfish of Viking archers, battling with the trashy pirate, but barely a pirate, mostly just a water guy, Hydroid. And yup, Avara is not gonna win this one. Although I dislike Avara because for some reason my idiot brain can't stop bullet jumping just out of habit when I try to switch to her, I do believe she's capable of great things. For example, Boom Boom controlling Fly Glaive. I'll show footage if that made 0 sense, but 'tis true, Avara is a decent frame at least. And Hydroid is straight up bad. I even came up with a whole new kit for him just for fun, like a Naros, purely because I thought he had so much potential. And he does. DE just hasn't quite found that gem hidden in the shitty rusting treasure chest named Hydroid. I'm gonna show one comment that is literally my exact opinion. This comment comes from Selberg, simply stating, Avara's boring, but still 10 times better than Hydroid. Plus he mentions the fun Boom Glaive fly build, just in more smart guy terms, you know. Actually, here's a quick second comment from Maverick recommending another fun build for Avara, simply known as, quote, the Boomy Bow build. No details, wasn't expecting any or anything, but if you want to try it, I guess you have to look up Boomy Bow build for Avara. Hydroid sails on to round 2. See you there.
Round 1. Fight!
Once again, the round 1 blowouts return with Korra versus Geyer. And although strong, Geyer didn't stand a chance. so she was voted the worst frame. Most of the comments, if not all, were in support of Korra, but also acknowledged the power and fun Geyer can truly portray on the battlefield. I'm going to show 2 comments on screen, both for Geyer being worse, but also both explaining the idea that Geyer is still a good frame. The first is a great comment here from Scholar Andrew, a comment I like to see where someone can admit to bias and actually put it aside in their vote. He states that although he believes Korra is technically better, his Geyer personally can do some nutty things and outperform a lot of Korras in public matches. He goes on to explain he knows this isn't a consistent among all players, and overall Korra has the ability to go longer in missions than Geyer, and she has more utility. I will personally add on to that little explanation that Korra also has Whip Claw, which exists, so way higher damage numbers than Geyer, sadly. Finally, his last point is light show fun, and yes, true. What about our second comment? That one dude says a very similar idea to the first. His main point is that Korra just has more sheer versatility and survivability, which places her squarely and easily on top of Geyer in any competition. See ya in round 2, Palpatine.
Round 1. Fight!
A top hat versus a burned chemist hat. Limbo versus llBonkll. Again, 2 frames I would say are very capable each in their own right. But who is worse? Who do you think is worse? Well, the people say it's the dapper gentleman that walks through dimensions, Limbo. Not as much of a blowout as a few of the other polls, not insanely close, but you know, I think this is a good spread when looking at the power of these two. Surprisingly, this is one of the first ones where the loser got a crap ton of support when they saw their frame losing, or winning. Damn it, I'm still confusing myself. Limbo, in my personal opinion, is annoying as shit unless they're running a little baby bubble. But I also know that not everyone thinks that way, and a lot of people actually enjoy having a Limbo on their team. I'm gonna start us with a pro Limbo comment, like why he shouldn't have been voted the worst. Maybe get some of these llBonkll voters on the other side, to the top hat side, you could say. The comment comes from Rose Ravis. This comment explains that although both frames can handle almost all content in a similar way, llBonkll's builds are more niche, and Limbo has a slight edge in most situations performance-wise. The main reason this commenter believes that the poll ended the way it did is because, and I quote, most people are underestimating Limbo. And I think this is a very important thing to hear for a lot of players. Limbo is actually more complicated than it seems, and although I don't like certain builds on him, they usually work and work well. Certain recent changes may hurt Limbo's capability, but he's in no way a weak frame. The comment that goes toward our real final outcome is from Fairwald, basically stating that llBonkll is his go-to Archon hunt frame. I mean, that was his reason. Gotta say, haven't seen a lot of llBonkll's in Archon hunts, but maybe I haven't really been looking, I don't know. I will say at the end here that I do think llBonkll is very strong, and being perfectly straight up with you all, I'm not really sure who I would have picked for in this match, bias aside. We will have to see if Limbo is hated enough to once again lose when he enters round 2.
Round 1. Fight!
I'm gonna kind of jump through this next one very quickly. It's Mag versus Loki. Clearly, one is objectively, no doubt in anyone's mind, worse. It's Loki. He's just been forgotten to time and hasn't nearly been tinkered with enough by DE to still be considered a viable frame for most content, other than like in-biz stuff. Not to mention the incredibly boring gameplay of just being invisible and radial disarming for an entire match. Let me throw up a few good comments and just let you read them. Rip Loki, I won't be surprised to see him make it much further than round 2 in this tournament, but for now he's only headed there. We will have to see if somehow Loki still has enough fans out there to not get voted further. Like seriously, please tell me if you're a Loki main. I don't think I've met one like ever.
Round 1. Fight!
Our best Warframe tourney runner-up is the next match with Mesa v Mirage. The Cowgirl did in fact make it to the championship match against Wisp and lost. So the outcome here wasn't very surprising, with Mirage being labeled worse and moving on to round 2. Despite the fact that she is really strong, but who was worse? It was her. Farty Fazbear, just gonna move on, says Mirage can do bigger numbers, but aimbot Cowgirl clears rooms in seconds with one button. Now, I will say, personally, I would also go with Mirage. Not only is Mesa's 4 good, but she can actually keep up with very high steel path with other builds that aren't all about her regulators. Most of the pro Mesa being the worst frame comments talk about Mirage's capability at higher level content, and say that Mesa falls off with her 4 at higher levels, such as this comment. And I get it. Mirage is certainly a very powerful option, even though I barely ever see her for some reason. I'm just gonna bet that Mirage doesn't make it further than round 2 right now. But we will have to see whether bias takes over the tournament. Secretly what I'm kind of hoping for.
Round 1. Fight!
We arrive at two pretty good frames again, and so it's not a complete landslide at least. The Dictator of the Dead, Necros, versus the Acrobatic Master of Fire, Nezha. And I kind of guessed this one. I was hoping Necros wouldn't be labeled the worst one, only because every time it's for a dumb reason, like he's not good for anything but looting. And I mean, that's just not true. Case in point, in Steel Path, he is a great tank frame. Shield of Shadows augment, I think it's called, is like the most important part of that build. With a decent build and that augment, your looting frame can make it very far and isn't just a looting frame. And that's without any type of subsume. And I mean, Terrify isn't bad either, by the way. He's at least above average. Alright, rant over about how Necros isn't just a looting frame. I don't know why I'm so mad about that. I don't even play him that much anymore. But he did get labeled the Dookie frame here, so let's look at the comments. I'd like to bring you to case in point, Mr. Parker, who says Necros is made of paper, and you can kind of stop reading there. Like, bruh, you played him? As you can see, many an argument was had in the replies to that comment. Feel free to pause as I let it scroll if you want to read them. Now, I will say, there's also a real comment I'll show an argument for Necros being voted worse. This comes from Maverick Dunduri once again. Gotta love when the comment starts by saying everyone else is wrong. Really builds confidence. He admits to the Necros being a lot of things. An armor stripper, a tank, a looter, but also says that Nezha can do more. With great damage, a CC with her ulti, a tank with Halo, and you can get some extra damage from Chakram, along with heals. So basically, his main point that I think everyone should take away, and what's most likely the reason for the outcome of this, is that Necros is good, Nezha is very good.
Round 1. Fight!
Nidus v Oberon. Who is bad, or you know, just not as good as the other? Well, it was Oberon. Poor Oberon Kenobi. He's being called tonight's big loser by Maverick. Pathetic by Lunar. Man's self-confidence is gone. You could have just stopped voting. He's crying, guys. Come on.
Round 1. Fight!
Uh-oh, angry comment one time. Octavia v Protea. Yes, I put two of arguably some of the best frames in the game together. Wanna know why? I felt like it, and I wanted to know once and for all who you guys thought was really worse out of these two. And I can say I'm severely disappointed with the outcome. Protea is cooler, easy shield gating, has a badass side flip, the most important thing. So like, come on guys, very disappointed. As you can tell, Protea was labeled with the L or the W. I'm so tired right now. Protea is moving to round 2. That's the big idea. But why? Well, let's see if Protea was mercilessly bullied out of the running like Oberon. Let's see. Taldaris admits to Protea's incredible power potential, but also says that Octavia's buffs are just too OP. Lunar says that Octavia just being capable of AFK makes her win. Well, not in those terms. I just think they didn't want to admit that they AFK with her. The quote is, ability to grind the game effortlessly. Like, how little effort, Lunar? How little, Roz says Protea is cool, but in comparison with Octavia, yeah. Okay, get ready for this one, guys. I was dared to pronounce this guy's name next time I mentioned his comment. He's gonna give me a booster or something. I mean, he doesn't actually have to, but hold out real quick. Zabil Viti Iset Accounta. Oh God, that was probably awful. Anyway, he made me, I promise. He is on my side. This commenter is on my team, saying that Protea is better. Now, remember, I said worse overall at the start of this video. That means pretty much what you want it to. Your overall can include what you want it to in your own head. Chaos is the best, and that's why I love these tournaments. And part of my overall when considering a frame is definitely a huge chunk fun factor. He states that Protea's power in combination with how much more fun she is puts Protea as the stronger, more fun and better frame here. So sadly, even though Protea will be moving to round 2 as the worst frame, there are supporters out there. Shout out 25% of you. Also, never make me try to pronounce something like that again, please. It's just embarrassing myself.
Round 1. Fight!
Another absolute blowout for poor Nyx. Nova versus Nyx is our next match, and Nova was overwhelmingly seen as the better frame, resulting in an outpouring of votes claiming once and for all Nyx is the trash pick here. And I will say, I agree, like no doubt in my head. Although Nyx is a capable frame, she can do a lot of different things. With Nyx's kit, you just have to look around. Pretty much everything Nyx does, another frame just does better. And don't get me wrong, I mean, she is capable. Nova also has incredible build crafting potential, making her way more fun to mess around with. There's actually a few comments I'd like to show that create the picture you need to see to understand these players' votes. From Divine Handrail and Mr. Segaldo, both admitting to Nyx's power and stating that she isn't bad by any means, but just overall Nova is better. There were a couple of people advocating for Nyx, but with a poll this spread, I think we have arrived at our correct answer. See you in round 2, Nyx.
Round 1. Fight!
Two very tanky frames up next, but one is severely outclassed by the other nowadays. It's time for Rhino v Rev. Unsurprisingly, the Rhino is worse, although actually closer than the Nyx v Nova vote somehow. In my personal experience, especially with all the extra time on my Rev Prime as of late, Rev is insane. If this was a tier list, he's going in S. Every single one of his abilities is nuts. And Rhino isn't terrible or anything, but not all of his abilities I would classify as quite nuts. They're mostly just alright. The comment that I'd like to show is simple, but clearly shows why Rev should win this. Sci-Fi Freak states, and I quote, "Rev literally can't be killed," unquote. And bam, that's all you need to know. Rhino may be a crazy tank with the right build, and a great DPS, CC, anything like that you want to talk about. But Rev, press Mesmer skin, literally no death. Like, you can't compete with that. Now, I would like to share a comment from a Rhino main, specifically a certain part that I think must be told to the people. And I quote here, "Rhino is more of a jack of all trades than a true tank. And for the love of God, please don't do iron skin setups. It sucks so bad. Quick click 2 twice with rolling guard, and it will scale infinitely better than that Mimi setup," end quote. And I think that's interesting to hear, because most Rhinos run that exact setup, and to be honest, I've always known it to be the one to go with because that's what I ran on my Rhino. Apparently, he says it's time for me and everyone else to try out high range stomp builds and stomp hull interception maps. Interesting. Again though, Rhino will be moving to round 2. Rev is seen as better.
Round 1. Fight!
A Toxin Queen versus the first member of Donald Trump's Space Force, Sevagoth. Sadly, the rescued Phantom is a worse frame in the eyes of our community here, and with good reason. Saren is an incredibly strong frame and has been forever, and although Sevagoth is also strong, just, think about it. Saren has always been in the forefront for meta frames, and her nuking capabilities are just crazy. Most of the many comments here on the poll speak of the very important fact that Gloom is just better on other frames. And I know, said earlier, don't bring Helminth into account, but before this voting happened, I didn't tell anyone that. My mistake. So, Gloom came into account here, and the Helminth came into account here a lot with the voting. Even without it, I still think Sevagoth would be seen as worse here, though. The main idea is, even though I didn't want it to be a thing, the reason for this vote is that if someone is subsuming a frame, overusing them, I feel like there's no chance they can be called better than the malicious master of miasma, Saren. Anyway, I'm not going to go too in-depth with the comments, just because it's a very simple point made across many of them that hopefully won't come up again. Again, guys, round 2, don't vote because of Helminth. Remember that. Let's go on as Sevagoth drifts to round 2.
Round 1. Fight!
Titania and Trinity are up next, 2 huge players in the world of the star chart, and another 2 I wouldn't say are bad by any means. But in the context of this tournament, we must find who is truly worse of the 2, even if slightly. And to my surprise, a well-loved support and Eidolon staple Trinity takes the title of the worst Warframe in this specific bout. This is another where I'm happy I didn't have to vote. I'm not really sure who I would have went with. Trinity is a very strong support and all, but Titania also offers a lot, especially being incredibly fast, which is always fun. There seems to be a clear consensus across the voters here, a simple fact that Trinity is outclassed as a healer by the powerhouse that is Wisp. Hell, she won the best tourney, so she at least has to be the best healer, right? Well, there is a comment that argues otherwise. Well, of course there is. Maverick is back. And I'm gonna summarize because he's beginning to get warmed up writing some mini essays before he gets to the books of info later on. Simply, he states that no one should look past Trinity, and she's a very capable frame, offering up a playstyle to live in Steel Path forever, and she can mitigate most status, helping a lot with Eximus. The combo he's speaking of is Link with Adaptation, Arcane Barrier, and 250 Duration. So, those of you that thought Trin was worse, I recommend trying out that build, see if your mind changes. This is one of the main reasons I'm glad I'm doing another tournament. People enjoy to offer up their builds that make these less used frames more powerful and showing these builds that a lot of people don't even think to do. And maybe you did it. Maybe this commenter has created a Trinity main today. Although, not gonna lie, I'm alright with the final decision here. Even though I don't know who I would have chosen, I'm not mad about who lost. I do think Titania is a strong frame.
Round 1. Fight!
Okay, we've arrived once again at 2 more strong frames, I know. Vauban versus Valkyr. Valkyr is actually going to go on to round 2. I would have personally went with Vauban even if I love the frame, only because Valkyr has power and insane fun, whereas I'd love to play Vauban and my team sure would appreciate it, but I'm not Spider-Man moding around the map and slashing everything on Vauban, am I? The people who voted llBonkll as worse showed another consensus across the comments, from Keen and from Julian. For these examples here, they're both kinda in agreement that Vauban takes this one mostly because of his capability to be useful in team play over llBonkll. Julian also explains that Vauban can just make missions go from hard to easy, whereas the comments on my side that say llBonkll is better, the right people, come on guys, let's show one of those. Ordis. His comments aren't always so clear, but usually how I explain things is how he explains things, so it works for me. He says llBonkll has more applications and a cooler theme. All Boobin has is, these are all like his own names in quotes by the way. We have the Suck, Tin Can of Splinters, 4 Idiot Balls, and Space Laser. Now, I think we should petition DE to change Vauban's ability name to 4 Idiot Balls permanently. It's just magnificent. A true wordsmith has entered the comment section. Back to the important thing. Sadly, Kat will be in round 2. I hope she goes no further, but we'll have to see.
Round 1. Fight!
Okay, this next one surprised me a crap ton. I'm not saying I disagree, just that I was surprised. This bout is that of the funny gorilla based on Pops from regular show, obviously. Who is this Goku fella people keep talking about? Come on. In a scuffle with Volt, an electric wonder that's been a staple frame in many players' daily activities for a long time. I mean, you could say that for both. These frames are incredible for so many different types of content, and some of the few frames I know many people have really tried out. But Pops lost. The Monkey Man Wukong is actually going to be labeled worse. Yup, the frame that so many people swear by is defeated by a frame you can choose off the start of your Tenno journey. That should tell you something. Why, you ask? Well, let's see what your fellow players have to say about that. A few comments I'll throw up explain that they made their decision based off of Volt's potential over Wukong to get to truly endgame content. And most of the points of Wukong are that he's incredibly easy to use and that's why everyone loves him. I will say, if you are a new player, the two frames I would recommend if you're not quite understanding the game yet would be Excalibur and Wukong. They're very straightforward and you'll figure out what's happening very quickly. Excal is just incredibly easy to learn, and the same goes for Wukong. Like, you're only going to be hitting a few buttons and you'll be able to beat most content. There actually weren't some Wukong supporters that made a separate point than Wukong's ease of use, and I'm okay with that. Less work for me. I will say I'm glad Volt won. It kind of showed me that at least half my viewers are at least somewhat experienced with the endgame side of Warframe, because that's truly the reason why I think Volt won. Volt is just better when you get to later game because he just offers so much, especially with his shield and eidolons and stuff.
Round 1. Fight!
It is time. No, I'm not gonna do my annoying shtick this video. I think we've all heard the 2 words I say every video enough at this point. At least for now. You'll never truly escape. It'll be back. But we are here. My favorite Warframe, Zaku, versus Yareli. Yeah, I mean, if you voted Zaku as worse, that's actually a capital crime around here, and I'm gonna have to ask you to please turn yourself in for punishment. As you can see, the obvious outcome is the obvious outcome. Yareli is the worst frame. Now, I'll admit, Yareli's fun, and the rework she got made her a little bit stronger. But come on, man, nowhere near enough of a buff to overcome Zaku, especially on this channel. If you can't tell and you're new around here, Zaku is and will always be my most played and my favorite frame, and the community is pretty much behind me on that. We all like Zaku around here, or at least like 70% of us. If you remember, we have a consistent commenter around here, especially with these tournament videos. A man named Erit. Poor Erit decided to be a masochist when he just woke up one day. He was like, I'm gonna be a Yareli main. And he made the mistake of admitting to that in my comment section. Poor guy was then relentlessly cyberbullied until he explained. And although I'll give it to him that he makes a few good points, I'm sorry, but nah. She just isn't better than Zaku, and I'm lazy, so I'm not even gonna explain myself. I make the video, so I get to say what I want. And Zaku, 100% factually, unequivocally, indisputably, no ifs, ands, or buts, the best frame in the game. If you disagree, I'm not really sure. I'll get back to you about that.
Round 1. Fight!
Our final matchup, remember, Wisp isn't part of this video, so there's only 50 frames. The Hunter of the Surface versus the Rain of Fire from the Sky. Varuna, our newest frame, and Zephyr. Personally, one of my new favorite frames is Varuna. Against a master that's been known to the game for a really long time though, it sadly seems the newest frame can't quite keep up with the oldie but goodie frame, Zephyr. and I do believe she is a great frame. In fact, they both are. I would have liked to see more bias here, to be honest, because I'm kind of sad Varuna is being called worse, but there are reasons. From a new commenter here on the video, Osiris comes in with the first, stating that Zephyr is just easier and more efficient of a frame to use. He also believes that Varuna allows for much less leeway in how you play. Kinda true, although Varuna can be played in a few different ways, she isn't that hard stuck into one playstyle by any means. Another commenter named Yaozu, probably definitely said that wrong, says, and I quote, "Bird redirects projectiles, bird wins." Good enough reason for me. Arctic here sadly did not make it in under the wire. Unlucky man. So who else might have a Varuna is actually better comment? Well, we'll head down to Lane Grays with my favorite comment on this post, and I will now be referring to Varuna's playstyle in this way when asked about it in the future. Vaguely wolf-shaped freight train holding a huge fuck-off sword. These tournaments really bring out the writers in all of you. I'm so proud. And that's that. I hope you all enjoyed the video. I'll throw up the final bracket on screen so you guys can see how it ended up. If you did enjoy the video, remember to head on down and possibly leave a like and a sub. It would help out my channel a lot. We're actually growing way faster than I ever could have imagined when I started posting Warframe videos, like not even a year ago yet. Maybe you're closing in on that. It's been a crazy year. We're probably gonna end up hitting 5K soon. I hope we do. So please head down and hit that sub button because that would be like a huge milestone. And we might do like a Q&A or something when I hit the 5K. Anyway, I also have a Discord link down below where you can come chat with other Tenno. We have a quest system to get your roles up in there where you can like do stuff in Warframe and get XP in the server. You can share builds, you can learn new things, you can win giveaways. I would also like to mention again that the next round of polling will begin as soon as this video is out, or at least very soon after, so make sure you're ready. As we go through, I'll show more comments from each matchup, as I said earlier. It's just a matter of time constraints when you have so many the first round. So keep telling me why you voted the way you did, and if you disagreed with these outcomes, you're too late to fix your fellow Tenno's mistakes. But maybe you can help bring the tourney back on track in your eyes. You'll never know until you vote and comment. Anyway, once again, I hope you have all had fun here with the voting and seeing the absolute ridiculousness that you've just witnessed. And play Zaku 24/7, or you'll never roll a Kuva weapon higher than 35% again. Good night.